of reference. 400 years later, the Sam Newsom assassin will became for Alabama, Georgia, and South Carolina, Mississippi take the hits, the real trade market for commerce and cotton was New York, the port of New York. As a matter of fact, Joe,
Good morning. We are here this morning announcing a lawsuit against one construction company, but it may go further. We have had the scare in the last several weeks about Legionnaire's disease in Harlem. And there now is up to 5 deaths, and we understand it affects 120 people. The fact of the matter is that for companies to not have assured and protected workers and follow the guidelines of making sure that they continually, in a timely, pre-described way, check on things like this, leaves rainwater and other things untested, and affects the workers there, 2 of which is going to be the plaintiffs in this suit, but there may be others. We understand that the effect of 120 people that we know of, and could be further. It is also interesting to us this neglect is in Harlem. We've seen the city of late just reach out and do things, but they drop zip codes. We are absolutely concerned that it is done in the Harlem community, which is why National Action Network has become involved. Some of the workers are afraid to come forward because they are afraid of their employment. Others are stepping forward because they are afraid for their life. And we are standing with them. This could be anybody in our communities, anywhere. We cannot have people, construction companies, or the city operate with this kind of thing hanging over us without there being some kind of accountability. And that is why we as a civil rights organization has got involved. And clearly, we stand with the Attorney General of Black America, who I will bring now, who is leading this lawsuit with his partner, and can explain. We have one of the victims. This man had the Legionnaires and did not know what it was and why he was sick. He works at Harlem Hospital. Next door is a school. It is frightening to us that there's not been accountability in this situation, so we make this move to begin a process of accountability and healing. Attorney Ben Crump.
Thank you so much, Reverend Al, for your leadership, as always. And it was clear to me when I knew that this was affecting the Harlem community, that Reverend Al fights for civil rights all across America, that he and National Action Network were certainly going to fight for the Harlem community. So thank you very much, Reverend Al. I'm Attorney Ben Crump, along with Attorney Jared Scotto and Attorney Alana Walk from Whites and Luxembourg Law Firm, and Attorney Nabiha Shear from the Ben Crump Law Firm. We have the honor of representing 2 construction workers who were affected while they were doing their jobs, trying to make a living for their families and not giving any warning. Understand this. This morning we announced the filing of this lawsuit against these 2 construction companies and give notice to the city because, Reverend Al, this wasn't a natural disaster. This medical tragedy that led to the deaths of 5 citizens from Harlem that we know about was a completely preventable outbreak. It was completely preventable. And so when corporations cut corners, tragedies like this happen. Preventable tragedies, unnecessary tragedies, people being hospitalized for days and weeks, having issues that cause them permanent damage. This is something that must be addressed. And so we are here to address it this morning by filing this lawsuit to get answers. This lawsuit just isn't about compensation, it's about change. It's about making sure that when corporations do things to cause harm to citizens' health and their lives, that it won't go unquestioned. Me and our legal team will not let it go unquestioned. We will make sure we get the answers that Harlem deserves. I learned that from my mentor, Reverend Al, that we question authority when it causes harm to our communities. It's not lost on Attorney Scotto and I, Attorney Walk, that all 12 of the sites that tested positive were here in Harlem. That's troubling on many levels, many levels. And that's why we have to get answers. I mean, Tennessee Williams, the writer, talked about the long, hot summer can cause unexpected challenges. But this was preventable. It was predictable. When you had the July rainstorms, Reverend Al, and the water pools in the cooling towers, it was predictable that it would cause Legionella bacteria. And so that's why we have the codes. That's why we want to make sure it is safe, because we know that Legionella bacteria can lead to people getting Legionnaire's disease, and that can lead to people dying. It is real. And so we want to make sure to get answers of why this happened in Harlem. It is the Department of Health's responsibility to make sure all of New York is safe. That includes Harlem. And that's why we're here fighting for Harlem, to get the answers, fighting for Harlem to get accountability, fighting for Harlem to get justice, fighting for Harlem to get respect, because justice equals respect. And that's what this is about. Harlem is the soul of this city. It's given so much culture, so much to the arts, so much to society. Too many times, Harlem has also had to bear the brunt of injustice. And that's why Reverend Al and National Action Network and our legal team say, Harlem, we're here to help you fight for those answers, fight for accountability, fight for justice. That's why we filed the 2 lawsuits against these 2 construction companies that were doing work on Harlem's hospital. Harlem is the epicenter of this Legionnaire's disease outbreak. And so we want to make sure we pinpoint why at the end of July, everybody was tight-lipped, Reverend Al, and they were not being transparent with people, because it is our belief that some of these tragedies likely could have been prevented had people known earlier. I know we are talking with one of the families who lost a loved one, and we're trying to get all the answers. We invite everybody who's been affected to talk to us, to make sure we can get answers. Reverend Al is a leader in this community. He will make sure you will be heard. I will make sure you will be heard. You won't be swept under the rug. You won't be forgotten about. You won't be marginalized. But first you have to come forward. And I know it's scary, because a lot of people on those construction sites, a lot of people who work for the Harlem Hospital and other localities that tested positive are afraid that if they come forward, they might lose their job. Well, don't be afraid of retaliation, because if they try to retaliate against you, then they got to deal with me, and they got to deal with my mentor, Reverend Al Sharpton. We're not going to let them retaliate against you when you're fighting for your lives, fighting for the lives of your community. So that's what this lawsuit is about. It's more than just compensation. It's about change. It's about accountability. It's about respect. And with that, I'm going to have my great co-counsel, Attorney Jared Scotto, who I've worked with, Whites in Luxembourg, on many cases to fight for justice for people, to talk about some of the more technical aspects of the lawsuit that were filed this morning. And these lawsuits we will make available to the public. After Attorney Scotto speaks, you will hear from our client, Nunzio Quinto, to tell you his story, and then Reverend Al and our legal team will take your questions. Attorney Scotto.
Thank you very much, Attorney Crump.
Yes, sir.
Reverend Al, it's a pleasure to be here at the National Action Network. This morning, attorneys from Ben Crump Law and Whites in Luxembourg filed 2 lawsuits against general contractors that are overseeing construction work at Harlem Hospital. New York State and New York City has robust laws to protect the construction workers that build this city, that give us places to live and to work. Those construction companies have an obligation to keep their workers safe. We believe these construction companies knew or should have known that Legionella bacteria was growing in the cooling towers at Harlem Hospital. There were releases done by the New York City Department of Health as far back as July 1st of this year. And we believe that those construction companies failed to provide a reasonably safe environment and a reasonably safe work site for their employees to build this great city and this great community. There are 2 sections of the labor law that were cited in our complaint, Section 241, sub 6, and Labor Law Section 200. We've filed these lawsuits against the construction companies now, but just like Reverend Sharpton said, we seek to hold all parties accountable, not just the contractors, but building owners, landlords, anybody else who is responsible for not testing and detecting this predictable and insidious disease. Thank you very much, once again, Reverend Sharpton, for having us.
Thank you, Attorney Scotto. And at this time, you will hear from Mr. Nunzio Quinto to tell what happened to him.
Hello, I'm Nunzio Quinto. I'm a union electrician. God bless Local 3. Yes, sir. At the end of July, I started feeling a little lethargic. I couldn't do basic things. And I thought I had food poisoning. I missed a day at work, and I wasn't getting out of bed all that Friday. And my family, Saturday morning, grabbed me and put me in a car and brought me over to Glen Cove Hospital. And I told them I was working up at Harlem Hospital. I thought I had food poisoning, and they realized there was a Legionnaire's disease breaking out, and they diagnosed it right away, admitted me, and began administering all kinds of antibiotics and stuff. And you could see I still got some of the marks and junk on my arm, which is a lot of fun, by the way. And not to mention the internal bleeding I had. But those people were great over there at the hospital, and they took good care of me. I was out 5 days later, and with no energy and unable to do anything. I'm finally starting to get up and walk around a little bit now, and can do basic things. But my thing is, I want answers of what's going on. I can't have a safe place to work. This is New York City. I can't have a safe place. My coworkers were very concerned, calling me constantly, and nothing was mentioned to them at the job site that I was sick. Nothing. Nobody said anything. So I just want answers on all this. Thank you.
Let me say, and then we'll open up for questions for Mr. Crump and I. Our concern is that whereas all of these cases and all of this that we know of in terms of the breakout has been in the Harlem community, the question that we would ask are, do people or companies thinking that they can be negligent in Harlem and not in other places? And if other places have been negligent, they should come forward. Secondly, as an organization, we want to say to people that have had the same experiences he's had, that they can come to us. We will stand with them and make sure there is no retaliation. They need to know that there is a place that they can go. There cannot be any excuse for this. And thirdly, we're not dealing with the politics of the matter. Let it go to wherever it goes. Whoever did not follow the code, whoever did not do what is required, must be held accountable. We have had 5 deaths, 120 people in the Harlem community, and we cannot sit by and act like this should not be taken on. It must be taken on. We're not going to allow this to go any further, and without also holding those accountable as we have people like him step forward. Are there any questions?
One company is Rising Sun Construction, and the other is Skanska USA Building. My name is Jared Scotto.
And it looks like one of the buildings is not Harlem Hospital, it's adjacent to Harlem Hospital, is that right?
There are 2 projects going on at the site, and there are separate general contractors for the 2 different projects.
You say this is not about compensation, it's about change. But what is the compensation you're seeking in these suits?
Well, obviously, in the United States of America, citizens have a right to the 7th Amendment. If they feel they've been wronged, they have a right to get redress from those who are accountable. So absolutely, we want the citizens of Harlem, as any American citizen, to be able to seek redress in the courts. We don't want them to go out in the streets and try to take matters into their own hands. We want a court of law to come and hear all the evidence, determine who was accountable, and then make sure they are fairly and rightfully compensated for what they have had to endure, especially those individuals who lost their loved ones. I mean, they died for, we believe, negligence. If that was your loved one, wouldn't you want accountability? But as Attorney Scotto, and as I've learned from Reverend Al over the years, it goes beyond just a lawsuit. It goes about affecting change. 12 locations tested positive. Only in Harlem. We have to make sure that Harlem gets the same attention, the same respect as every other part of New York. That's what we mean when we say change. We don't want to come back 2 years from now and have something like this happen again. Then it would be shame on us for not stepping up and helping Harlem get the justice and the respect that they deserve.
With all due respect, sir, is there a figure that you have in the suits? How much?
Let me say this, that, and I think the crux of it is what Attorney Crump just said. If this had come to us and we did not do something, we would be negligent. We as a civil rights organization work with all kinds of victims. Since 34 years ago, we started National Action Network with Bensonhurst, with Yusef Hawkins, to now. We have fought for many victims and never got one dime, even when they got multi-million-dollar settlements. Mr. Crump, Representative George Floyd, and others can tell you, I paid for the funerals and didn't even ask to be reimbursed. So this is not about compensation. Nan will not get a dime What we want is to see people compensated. And we want them compensated for their misery, and whatever they get is theirs. It has nothing to do with why I've called you here today. Nan has never got some families I'm still helping because that's what we do. We've never asked a family for a quarter.
Amen.
Mr. Scotto, are either of the two workers employed by these particular companies, or these were the companies that were just?
Neither plaintiff are employed by the named defendant companies.
And also, why aren't you suing the city, being that their health inspectors are supposed to be up there checking this on a regular basis?
We filed notices of claim this morning against the city of New York. As many of you may know, 4 of the contaminated sites here in Harlem are buildings owned by the city of New York, including Harlem Hospital.
Do you believe they were negligent in their inspection process?
We're going to find out. That's why we filed the lawsuit. We're going to find out everybody who was responsible. That's why we filed the notice of claim. And they have a certain amount of time to do their investigation and so forth. And then at that point, if they determine that they were not negligent and we and our experts believe they were, then we will file our lawsuit against the city. Because like Reverend Al said, it's not politics. Wherever the evidence leads us, we believe the citizens of Harlem deserve answers, accountability, and justice. Yes, ma'am.
What could the construction companies have done better to protect their workers?
Well, a lot of things. I'll say this and then let Attorney Scotto speak to this issue. But it's like Mr. Quinto said, nobody gave them any warning that, hey, we detected something, you should have your mask, we're gonna shut down the site until we can figure out to make sure that these cooling towers are safe and free from Legionella bacteria, because it's preventable. It's once you have notice, you have a duty to act. It's not like this, it's a mystery. We know when you have big rainstorms, that's the reason you have to do the testing. That's the reason why they put the burden on the companies to make sure that in their cooling systems that they're protecting their workers from being exposed to Legionella bacteria. Attorney Scotto, what duties do companies have?
We believe that the construction companies were on notice that Legionella bacteria contamination was a possibility based on bulletins that were given out at the beginning of July. As Mr. Quinto said, there were no protections in place for the workers. Everybody knows and understands, based on outbreaks that have happened in New York City, even as recently as the last couple of years, that Legionella is a very serious condition, and it's a very predictable risk, as Attorney Crump said. And we know that the law requires these construction companies to provide a reasonably safe work site, and they didn't do that.
What were these bulletins exactly?
When you ask a question, tell me who you are.
Sure. My name is Aria Sunder. I'm with WNYC.
Okay.
I was wondering, what exactly were these bulletins? Who were they given to? What did they say?
There was a bulletin that was sent out July 1st through New York City Health and Hospitals, and that's all we're going to say about that right now.
And let me say this, because I think it's important to know that we don't want to believe anybody intentionally did this. That's why it's a lawsuit based on negligence. Somebody dropped the ball. Somebody was asleep at the wheel. Somebody didn't follow what the codes were, because Legionella bacteria is known that when you have these waters sitting for long periods of time, that it will develop. That's why the codes are in place, to try to prevent outbreaks like this, to save people's lives. Understand, this is a healthcare crisis. When people die, one life is too many. 5 lives are far too many. And we pray that there are no other lives lost in Harlem as a result of what was a preventable outbreak. This wasn't a natural disaster. So people have to be held accountable because, as Reverend Al said, if nobody's held accountable, then what happens when it happens again and more lives are lost? We can't allow that. Yes, sir.
Antoine Lewis, Fox 5. A question for Mr. Quinto, if you step to the mic, sir. Would you just tell us when you learned that it was Legionnaire's disease? Just how did you process that? Be as honest as you can and speak from your heart.
Well, originally I thought it was food poisoning, all right? But when I woke up Saturday morning, my family took me to the hospital because I was not in the right frame of mind. I didn't know what was going on. When they got me to the hospital at Glen Cove, I told them I was working at Harlem Hospital, and I thought it was food poisoning. And I guess they understood what was happening with the Legionnaires, and they diagnosed it right away and admitted me immediately.
Show us your arm and tell us what that was. They just give
Yeah,
us
well,
a second.
I got a rash coming out of here. I don't know what it is. This is all where they prodded and poked me for blood and all other things they've taken. I'm in pain right now because I got something going down my right leg, which I didn't have before this happened. I'm sure it'll go away somehow. I had breathing problems. I couldn't even talk. I would speak a little bit, a few words, and then I had to gasp for air. I had internal bleeding. I was lethargic. I just could not put things together. I sat there for 2 weeks, basically. I'm up a little now, walking around and feeling a little better, but it's a process.
Why come forward? You could have stayed silent. You could have let others.
I could have. But what about my coworkers that were over there, were kept texting me, what's happening, what's going on? I asked them a simple question. Did they tell you that I was sick? Did they warn you? Did they put any safety precautions in place? No, they said nothing. This is why you come forward and say something. I'm going to retire in a year. I don't give a damn. What are they going to do to me? What are you going to do to me?
And Mr. Quinto, were some of your other colleagues sickened but afraid to come forward?
Not that I know of, no.
And I just want to confirm, you worked for SCANSA?
No, I do not. They're the general contractor. My company was hired by them as a subcontractor.
And then there's a second victim named Headley. He is still in the hospital, and I just want to ask, do we know if other construction workers were sickened and haven't come forward?
I don't know.
There were other construction workers that were hospitalized. And what's the phone number?
Do you wanna-
I'm going to turn it over to Rev for a minute. This is the number that we are telling people who are affected, don't be afraid, they can't come forward. 888-790-3136. And we will make sure that you won't face retaliation. 888-790-3136.
What is that number?
That is for me and Attorney Scotto's law firms.
Yes.
Yes, hi, Scott Harford, Harford PC. I'm an attorney, and I've been involved in.
Well, this is a press conference. It's not a PC.
Samantha Liebman, New York One. I just want you to talk a little bit more about the focus on Harlem and, what your thoughts about with the city that's been negligent and ignoring inspecting cooling towers. Are you concerned that Harlem is just not getting the attention from the city?
I'm concerned when we have 5 people that is now deceased. We have others that have now been diagnosed, and it all is around the Harlem community. If you heard what he said, when he told them at the other hospital that he worked at Harlem Hospital, they said, oh, it may be Legionnaires. We should not. Harlem has been known as the capital of Black America. We should not be known as the capital of Legionnaire's disease.
Wow.
Yes.
Michelle Charlesworth from Channel 7. Could you just, for people who don't really understand how cooling towers work, could you explain that? And was it a danger only to the construction workers or throughout the entire buildings involved, allegedly? And also, do you have water samples that show the bacteria in the water in question?
At this point, we're not in possession of any water samples. We're following the information that the city has released through the Department of Health, through the doctors that work there. What was the first part of your question?
Talking about cooling towers, how they work, and whether or not that bacteria potentially could have affected
The answer to that question is yes. It is possible. And I think one of the problems that, that stem from the way the city has handled this, which is something that Reverend Al touched on during his opening remarks, was the only information that was put out there were the zip codes. We don't know what the pattern of spread was. We became very accustomed as Americans and citizens of the world to hearing about the spread of disease throughout 2020. We were told when to go to work, when to see our families. We were not told here who was sick. We know now that there are 2 construction workers. We know that there are now over 100 other people that were infected with this disease. Where were they working? How many of them were living in buildings? How many of them were hospital patients? We were never given that information, and the people of this community weren't given that information, and they weren't able to protect themselves by knowing exactly where the spread of that bacteria was.
And I was just, could you please explain for people how cooling towers work? They're on rooftops, but they don't stay. What's going on there? It does not just stay on the rooftop for the birds.
No, the bacteria spreads through mist. It aerosolizes. Legionnaires is not communicable from person to person, but it is something that you can inhale. So when that mist spreads, whether it's through the building's cooling system, whether it's through the air, that's how the disease spreads. And we'll have experts that are ready to comment on it. Right now, there's ongoing litigation.
And that's an excellent question, because many people in Harlem were affected and haven't come forward for whatever reasons. We want them to come forward. We want them to make sure that they are healthy. I imagine some people may have financial issues with the high cost of health care, and they're not dealing with it to make sure they're completely healed. Legionnaire's disease outbreak is a healthcare crisis. As Reverend Al and other civil rights organizations have said over and over again, healthcare is a civil right in the most richest country in the world. We want them to come forward. We want them to know that their health is important, that their lives are important. Are there any other questions before we conclude? Well, since we announced the press conference, we got many calls that our intake center are taking, and I understand there are more construction workers. I don't know at this time, but we'll let you know. And dealing with the wrongful death, I'm sure Reverend Al and us be dealing with those families as they have to get ready to pay their respects to their final respects to their loved ones. Yes, ma'am. Yes, New York law, but
This is a labor law issue. Like I said at the top, New York State has very robust laws to protect construction workers, and those laws apply to the general contractors and to the owners of the buildings. And when the contractors have a non-delegable duty to make sure that the work sites are safe. And here, given the fact that Mr. Quinto was hospitalized, given the fact, I just want to clarify something that somebody said before, Mr. Headley is no longer in the hospital, but Mr. Headley was also sick. He's also our client. He was a construction worker at Harlem Hospital. They have an obligation to make sure that they follow the sanitary codes, that they follow the industrial codes to provide our construction workers and the members of our communities a safe place to work.
So are they required to do testing specifically for Legionnaires, or are they relying on city reports about that?
it's a labor law issue. They have a strict liability duty to their employees, the construction workers on the site. Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm a member of a journalist, and I'm also in one of the buildings that were affected by the Legionnaire. But what recourse, I live in a condo, do we have as residents? We may not be sick, but our lives are put in jeopardy, and
Give us a call and let's discuss. We have the number, and we welcome everybody to call.
Because I'm getting ready to end this, you can talk to them here. Again, this, just in answering her direct, It begins with the companies because they have a responsibility, but that does not mean this is where it will end. We will go friend or foe that has put this community in jeopardy. And they can call the lawyers or they can call Nan. I don't care what lawyers they go to. We cannot, I have people here, 200 people here every Saturday and do my radio broadcast. Any of us could be impacted by this. We're not going to sit by and allow this to happen. All right, this is the last question.
I'm Kim Smith, community journalist of Kim Smith Reports. What is the incubation period? Because this has been
That's a good
since
question.
July, and people are still, the numbers continue to increase. So can we please get a bit of information?
The incubation period for Legionella infection is widely believed to be 2 to 14 days. And some of the reports that have come out about the rising numbers could just be a lag in reporting. It could also be some people that were diagnosed towards the tail end of their infection. We can't answer that with any certainty.
And like many things in our community, people are not trusting of the system. So that's why National Action Network and Reverend Al, we're telling them they can trust the system to come forward. Don't suffer in silence. You know, this is our community's issue. We have to stand together as a community and face it head on.
All right, thank you very much.
Mr. Quinto, spell his last name for us so we can make sure we get it right reference.
Q-U-I-N-T-O.
And Nunzio?
N-U-N-Z-O.
Z-I-O.
And Mrs. Snyder, your first name.
Jared, J-A-R-E-D.
Thank you.
And Al, A-L.